to talk to our international affairs commentator, Doug Herbert, who's joining me here on set. Doug, the UK and the rest of Europe, I mean, they're in a real bind, aren't they, as it figures out how to respond, really, to Donald Trump's threats over Greenland?
It's true, Stuart, and the reason it's a real bind, a real dilemma. There have been dilemmas before. There have been crises before in the 1 year since Trump returned to the White House. In that transatlantic relationship, it's become not just bumpy, it's been in grave crisis and some fear that it could collapse altogether, and that NATO could go out the window too. The question for Europe is, its operating procedure until now, its sort of default mode has been, you do not confront Donald Trump. What you do is you try to appease him, you try to flatter him, you try to cajole him. You just mentioned the British Prime Minister Keir Starmer. We'll remember that he went famously to the White House, sat down in the Oval Office, pulled that invitation from Prince Charles out of his pocket, for another state visit. That has been sort of almost the analogy for the European approach to Trump. And the question is right now, the Greenland issue, if you want a crisis, whichever word you want to use, it comes down to Europe's own sovereignty, a European member's own self-determination, its own rights, its own territorial integrity. We're not talking about some far-off, far-fetched geopolitical prospect here. And the question being, if Europe can't stand up to Trump and push back in some way, shape, or form right now, in this particular crisis, this is the ultimate litmus test, then when can it? And is the price of not pushing back at Donald Trump, that is the price of continuing this sort of Trump whisperer approach, this try to flatter him, try to get him on side, strike a nice little trade deal with him, as Ursula von der Leyen, the European Commission president, did last summer, that deal which is now in jeopardy. All of that, if you continue that approach, it sounds good in the short term, but might you just end up exactly where we are right now, which is why Europe is putting on the table initially some retaliatory options, including tariffs, upwards of $107 billion, 93 billion euros, and as Emmanuel Macron put out there on the table, a weapon never before used by Europe. It's an anti-coercion measure, which would actually restrict access for U.S. companies to Europe and restrict investment as well.
So, Doug, short of going to war with the US, though, what can Europe actually really do to try and put its case forward and try to advance things here?
3 scenarios. So I've been looking all over these different scenarios to try to sort of map it all out. The Jacques Delors Institute here has really boiled it down to what I think are 3 very standard and realistic scenarios. They seem the most plausible in varying degrees of consequences for Europe. And one of them, and we hear this a lot, is the so-called do-nothing approach. That is, continue the path they've done, fold their cards, don't confront Trump at all. This is, they call it the Arctic scenario, the Arctic Munich scenario, a reference to the Allies selling out the Sudetenland, the modern-day Czech Republic, to the Nazis in World War II, the Munich. So Arctic Munich, meaning just selling Greenland to the highest bidder, in this case Donald Trump, or letting it be taken over. That would have potentially devastating consequences on Europe's credibility and on NATO, which might existentially cease to exist. There's the preventive deterrence, limited multilateral deployments of European forces in Greenland, not to fight the U.S., but to send a symbolic message that we, the Europeans, are there to do just what Trump claims to want to do, which is ensure Greenland security against a potential threat from Russia or China. That could make it much harder, a higher price for Trump to then go ahead and try to invade. A political cost, too, if Republicans in Congress and outside begin to say, yeah, this is reasonable, and he should not invade. And finally, there's the confrontation option, which is the ballistic option, unlikely to happen. But yes, a clash between U.S. and European forces, a clash which U.S. forces would likely win. And that would be a very high price for Trump to pay. And that could cause a lot of the MAGA movement to do an about-face. Europe isn't going there anywhere near yet. In fact, they're more likely to want to try to talk again to Donald Trump and not push back, not yet even with the tariffs.
Doug, just finally, let's talk about Greenlanders.
Yeah.
I mean, do they get a say in this? There have been protests, of course, 60,000 or so residents. What's their say?
Yeah, well, listen to this. Over the weekend, you probably saw some of those pictures. you had protests in both Greenland's capital, Nuuk, which has 20,000 of those total 60,000 residents on Greenland. Hundreds turned out, both in the capital of Greenland and also in Copenhagen. Remember Denmark, the Kingdom of Denmark, Greenland's a part of it, has broad autonomy within it, and all of that. But hundreds of people turning out in the capital. This is something almost never, if ever, seen on the streets of the Greenland's capital. Most people have never heard of it, right? Nuuk. But it was the scene of those protests, and it shows that there is an overwhelming part of the Greenlandish population who are dead set against the prospect of becoming part of the U.S., of a U.S. takeover. As they've said, the island, Greenland, is not for sale. And given the choice, as their prime minister and others have made clear, Greenland would choose very much to remain part of Denmark. There's been a movement over the years in favor of independence, which would require a referendum. That doesn't seem to be on the table right now. The prospect of the U.S. takeover of Greenland has basically, for now at least, taken a lot of the mojo out of that any referendum or independence movement. Greenland doesn't want to be a part of the U.S. They enjoy high living standards. They have free universal education. They have free health care. One of the consequences they fear being taken over by the U.S. would be a collapse and all that. No more health care, no more free education, and perhaps less respect for their individual human rights and their self-determination. So they are right now siding with Denmark in this, as they have for decades and hundreds of years, over the United States. They do not want to become part of the U.S. They, as One Hat said in the protests in Denmark over the weekend, MAGA, make America go away.
Doug, thanks very much. Doug Herbert, our international affairs commentator here on France 24. As Doug was speaking